Philosophical critique of human creation in Shelley's Frankenstein. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein appeared when the science fiction genre was only in its infancy and development. For the 19th century, the story of a man who managed to create a living being in a way that was not natural was, on the one hand, a tremendous shock and, on the other hand, something frightening and awe-inspiring. I believe that fear, not of the creature itself, but fear of God's wrath for encroaching on his rights and man's attempts to act as the creator himself, is the theme that pierces the entire work. The main character, the scientist Frankenstein, has many talents, which he embodied in his work. Victor is a resident of Geneva, the son of prominent citizens of the Republic. As the hero himself says, his childhood was happy. Already at an early age, the boy developed a passion for learning about the earth and sky, the mysteries of the human soul, and the physical mysteries of the world. My interest was focused on the metaphysical or, in the highest sense of the word, the physical mysteries of this world. He spends all his time reading books on the natural sciences and even then begins to search for the philosopher's stone and the elixir of life. As a young man, he goes to university, where he can quench his thirst for knowledge. Thus, Frankenstein thirsts for knowledge of human nature and its limits. He begins to study the bodies of dead people and comprehends the mystery of the origin of life. Victor says that this immeasurable power turns his head. Thus, the motive for his act was simple and uncomplicated, scientific interest and a thirst for universal recognition. The creature Frankenstein made is too ugly to be called human, yet it is intelligent and capable of self-learning and cognition, which makes it far from being an animal. The root of this problem lies in topics far removed from science and fantasy. Man is a living being endowed with the gift of thinking and speech, the ability to create tools and use them in social work. If we consider this question from the psychological side, man is endowed with such feelings as love, compassion, pity, jealousy, joy, sadness, anger, and aggression. That is, he can build relationships based on higher, namely, love feelings, empathy, and help others. In addition, the man himself is a creature created by the love of two people, not by animal instinct. Frankenstein's creation, firstly, is a creature artificially created by man from the body parts of deceased people and remotely resembling man himself. Secondly, it is a creature amenable to self-analysis, learning, and development, and capable of feeling. Despite its human-like essence, some characteristics strongly distinguish it. It is certainly unique and, most importantly, unable to reproduce offspring. Considering the phenomenon of Frankenstein's creation from a philosophical aspect, I can also trace its similarities to the human creature. Man is a unity of the material and the spiritual. All these elements are present in the scientist's creation, which his parents did not develop in him. Thinking began to appear in him almost from the moment of his creation, self-awareness in his acquaintance with nature and the surrounding world, which perceived him quite emphatically. The language resulted from his observations of the hut's inhabitants near which he had established his dwelling. The monster, as the author calls it, is a perfect example of the fact that even if man succeeds in comprehending the science of reproducing other organic beings, even if this creation is capable of developing and displaying feelings and emotions, it will not be able to comprehend such simultaneously trivial and high human feelings as happiness and love. If even such beautiful creatures suffer, I am no longer surprised that I am miserable and lonely. Man should not assume the authority of God because he cannot create a perfect creature, much less make his existence complete. The scientist flees from his creature because of fear of retribution for having condemned an already living being to be eternal mental torment and suffering. My misdeeds are produced by forced solitude, which I abhor. As mentioned earlier, the scientist's motive was not only a desire to know the world, man, and his nature, but also a desire for universal recognition. By gaining fame, respect, and acquaintances, a person first acquires a certain power and even strength, which can influence others in one way or another. The desire for power is the main driving force behind a person's behavior and activity. The subject tries to compensate for his inferiority, expressed in various factors, from bodily defects to family circumstances and personal problems. In the case of Victor Frankenstein, his desire for power is greatly influenced by his spiritual loneliness. Thus, when recalling his adolescent years, the protagonist says, My life was solitary and pervasive in the domestic circle. It instilled in me an unconquerable aversion to new faces. As an adult, he wrote, I have no friend, Margaret, no one to share my joy if I should succeed. I need the company of a man who would sympathize with me and understand me half-heartedly, but I bitterly feel the absence of such a friend. Thus, from childhood, Frankenstein experienced a lack of relationships filled with spiritual understanding, which can be a real problem for a person and a sufficient impetus for his desire for domination. By creating one of his kind, Victor considers himself all-powerful, superhuman. The scientist abandons morality to achieve his goal. How can I tell of the terrible vigils of those nights when I dug through grave mold or tormented living creatures to revive dead matter? However, Victor Frankenstein is blinded by his passion. He only pays attention to his condition, submitting to his desires and instincts. Thus, it can be concluded that Mary Shelley's novel Frankenstein, or The Modern Prometheus, is based on a philosophical question, namely the theme of man and the role of God. The author uses the example of the two main characters in her work, the scientist Victor Frankenstein and his creation, to deny the possibility of a man acting as a creator. The author forces the reader to reflect on his existence and worldview. Using the example of a scientist, she shows what the desire for dominance can lead to either way.